Greetings and welcome to the Sports Shuffle. We are into week 17, championship week for fantasy football on the horizon for some of us. I've got 3 plus the Megla Bowl still to go. I am flying Ryan Gilchrist along with.
Tampa Motormouth Joel Verone. I think I've got a third place game. Yeah, that's about it this week. It's been a horrid Denver Bronco esque, Houston Texan esque type season for me fantasy wise.
Yeah, sometimes it happens like that. Yeah, 3 teams still to go. 2 of them are ESPN leagues, so I won't even know what happens until the end of week 18, a Dynasty League next year, and the Megla Bowl. 1,370 people left out of about 19,000. I am one of them. And if last week would have been the last week, I was 122nd. So hopefully we have a better week. It's going to come down to Packers Vikings for me being a very, very high scoring game. With that being said,
Yeah, we have some
a lot of
definite
news.
some headlines. As I've got at least I think 5 stories. As it definitely sets up what I'd like to call chaos incarnate for fantasy championship English. It's a hard language. Fantasy Championship Week 17. So I'll just start off with the first one that ended up breaking in the afternoon. Of course, Derek Carr was, and the interesting thing about this fly is he wasn't benched because at first I thought, oh, okay, if Stedham is going to be taking over, he's benched. No, he was placed on the inactive list for the rest of the season. So, what do you think his ultimate fate will be?
Derek Carr will not be a Raider. He will not play in another game for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going to be released in the offseason. I think he's actually only got a $5 million cap hit next year. He is not going to be a member of this team going forwards. Um, Interesting to see what happens with him. I mean, you got Carolina's got a bad quarterback situation. You got Indianapolis needing a full-time replacement as they're on quarterback number
Yep.
3 on the year. You can make the argument for Washington. You can make the argument that Miami needs a quarterback, at least a solid
Tampa
backup. We'll get to that news here in a little bit.
Tampa might need a
Tampa could be in
quarterback.
that
That's
mix.
yeah.
I mean, even teams like Seattle, Denver technically should be, but the cap situation, the contract situation of Russell Wilson is going to prevent that. He's going to go somewhere. He's not going to be out of the league. He might be fighting for a starting job. He might be a backup for a good team that's got a good quarterback that maybe has some issues. So
Right.
he's not going to play again for the Raiders. They will cut him before his contract next year, $40 million becomes guaranteed. And yeah, we'll see what Jared Stidham can do. If you have Devontae Adams in your
Our
championship week, you're
our
not
our
loving life right now.
our commiserations. Number two story, one that definitely hits closer to home, at least
Yeah.
as far as football goes to you. Tua Tagovailoa, of course, will not play Saturday, meaning hello, Teddy Bridgewater, in a very pivotal game against the Patriots that has a almost playoff atmosphere. So hashtag sorry, Waddle and Hill managers. So going forward, Ryan, what do you think since this is his third concussion this season? That's fairly excessive. What do you
Yeah.
think the concern going forward should be for Tua's health?
I'm going to talk a lot more about my opinions on what the future of Tua Tagovailoa is in the NFL here in a little bit. Short term, let's look at the reality situation. Teddy Bridgewater will be starting against the New England Patriots in a very important game for the Miami Dolphins playoff hopes. 8-7 with a win and a Jets loss. The Dolphins will lock up that 7th and final wild card spot for the playoffs. However, the Jets win over Seattle. New England beats Miami, and all hell can break loose week number 18. We'll see about Tua long term. The worrisome part about this is I don't recall a hit during the game that stood out as okay. That could have been the
Because
concussion.
he didn't even have any concussion symptoms until Monday.
Well, I would argue if you watch the fourth quarter of that game, he started throwing stupid passes. Like his head was not in the right mentality, right spot. 3 picks in the fourth quarter. We'll get to that game recap here in a little bit. But I remember watching this game with my family going, he's throwing at guys that aren't looking for the ball. He's throwing it into, like, he overshot Tyreek Hill when there were 5 defenders around. He wasn't making good decisions. Whether that was the concussion or trying to force things, it's hard to know for sure, but that he was in concussion protocol on Monday. leads me to believe that he was starting to have some decision issues during that game. I
On what?
saw someone post that they saw of a play in the late second quarter where his head struck the ground, but that happens a lot in the NFL. That's not necessarily his head hit the ground. That's a concussion because we see sometimes where the head doesn't hit the ground and it's just the shock against the helmet or shot back that can cause some problems. And sometimes this is just forcible contact with the ground, but it's not a good situation for Tua in the short term. You want him to get properly healthy. The Dolphins are going to be investigated again, or at least this situation is going to be investigated again by the NFLPA. And Tua not in the best of shape.
Story number three, that the Commanders are making a switch at quarterback with Carson Wentz coming in. So Terry may not be so scary this week. So my question to you with this is, I know that Taylor Heineke, of course, really gave the Commanders a good spark, but kind of has been slumping a little bit recently. So do you agree that Carson Wentz change at this time is the right call for Ron Rivera?
Carson Wentz, he was hurt the last couple of games he played. He was actually very good to start the season for this team. So I don't think it's a bad decision to give him another opportunity at the helm. Heineke was a spark plug. He was a jump start to this team, but unfortunately, at some point when you jump the battery in your car, it's going to die again. And you can't keep hoping that the same thing is going to jumpstart it in this case. So they need to get a new quarterback. They need to get a new battery. I don't think Wentz is the long-term answer, but I think he's a better option than Tyler Heineke. And unfortunately for Heineke, he's just a good backup quarterback for this Washington team. And we'll see if about Carson Wentz coming in and getting the job done. Of course, Washington needs to pretty much win out to guarantee themselves a playoff spot.
And number four, not really a lot of discussion, I think, needed on this one, but expect, of course, another Huntley game as Jackson seems not quite ready to come back. So the obvious question here is, are they saving Lamar Jackson for the playoffs?
They might as well at this point. They've got the playoff spot clinched. They are still a game ahead of Baltimore. They're 2 games ahead of Miami. They cannot be any worse than the 6th seed. They could be the 5 seed. And yes, we'll talk about the Titans and Jaguars situation. It is going to be an advantage to play that number 4 seed over the number 3 seed, who could be Kansas City, Buffalo, or Cincinnati. That 4 seed is definitely a weaker opponent. So Baltimore probably would love to be able to hold on to that number 5 spot without Lamar Jackson, but they're not going to risk his long-term health. He's not under contract for next season. They don't want to risk that being a factor as well in the contract talks. So they're going to take their time with Lamar Jackson and make sure he's 100% back to normal.
And the final one for me, I'm sure you have other news that you want to bring up, but guess who may not play in Week 17? Yeah, that would be possibly Derrick Henry. So, my maybe not so politically correct question is, if you're a Derrick Henry manager, you're in the championship, how screwed are you? See Jalen Hurts managers who probably lost because they had to fill in with somebody else.
Derrick Henry officially listed as doubtful. He's probably not going to play. You might want to look at Haskins, who's the backup, I believe is his name. It's not good when you don't necessarily know the guy's name. It's a tough deal. This game, outside of the slim shot at the wild card spot, really doesn't play into their Week 18 outcome. They're going to have a win-in game against Jacksonville Week 18 for the division. So this one doesn't really matter. They're playing Dallas, who's been very, very good. So they're trying to make sure he's good for that Week 18 game, get in the playoffs, and hope for the best. If you're a fantasy owner and you still have Derrick Henry and you're in a championship game, you're going to need to find other options. I have that in an auction league. You can only do what you can do. There's not a whole lot of options out there at this point. So hopefully you've been stashing guys. You made trades at some point and have a little bit of depth for at least a flex consideration, because you probably have 2 other starting running backs if you're in a championship format, championship week. You should have 2 startable running backs and then someone else you can put in that flex to pull Derrick Henry. Should only be 1 week if you are in an ESPN league like my auction league is. So it's only the 1 week of the 2. He can come back and be a monster in week number 18. But it's not great if you have him in fantasy, of course.
Any other news or notes that's really what you would call paramount for Week 17 that I might have overlooked? As everything seems to be just quarterback centric. today and this week.
Well, Tony Pollard is going to be a game time decision for the Cowboys. He's been a good piece. You could have him in some fantasy lineups. You're going to want to know if he's playing early enough, especially, or if you have Zeke. If you have Zeke, that's a big piece of news. Pollard's out. Zeke can go absolutely crazy in the next game. Greg Dulcich, not at practice, hurt his hamstring against the Rams. He's been one of the few bright spots for the Broncos this year. Keep him in the back of your mind. Tight end's kind of a cesspool. Alvin Kamara not at practice due to a personal issue. Saints really don't have a lot of good things going on, but they are technically tied for first in that division, or a game back of first in that division. Big game with Tampa and Carolina this week. So hopefully for them, they'll be good. Chris Olave did return to practice, so that is good news as well. Deebo Samuel has a chance to play this week, chance to practice on Thursday, so that's good news for the already red-hot 49ers, as well as Brock Purdy being a full participant. Colt McCoy going to start in Atlanta. We saw Trace McSorley. We had the experience against Tampa Bay, and oh boy, if you're a Bucs fan, you had to have some real pain that night and the next morning. You didn't feel good about life in general. Aaron Rodgers picked up a knee injury on Sunday. He did not practice.
Even if you were a Bucs fan, you were going holy bleep a lot.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers picked up a knee injury on Sunday, not practicing. I don't expect that to be a problem. No Tua at practice, no big surprise there.
No shock, Sherlock.
Yeah, not. Also, worth noting, J.J. Watt retiring at the end of the season. So future Hall of Famer we expect. He's hanging it up after this Cardinals' last 2 games.
With how the season has gone, I'm not surprised. It's sort of like, okay, I don't want another year of this. I was gone.
Yeah, so J.J. Watt, a great career. Also, $37 million raised for Hurricane Harvey relief. NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year that year in 2017. So I'm sure he's going to stay around the game in some capacity. So congrats on a great career. We'll see him in Canton in about 5 years, I'm sure. But yeah, J.J. Watt retiring at the end of the season. First one to announce they're going to be retiring at the end of the season. And yeah, as we mentioned, Tua is going to be out, so it will be Teddy Bridgewater under center on Monday or Sunday.
It's week of the backups.
Yeah. Before we get to that, let's go back all the way to Thursday night quickly.
Going into the fantasy time machine.
Yeah. Jacksonville 19-3 win over the Jets. Zach Wilson, his career looks to be kiboshed in New York. Mike White cleared to play, will be the starter. Zach Wilson will be inactive going into week 17 against Seattle. The Jets and Jaguars both 7-8. Jets need a Dolphins loss next week against the Jets. It was a good time for it to make the playoffs, and then they got to win out, obviously. But Jaguars 7-8 at the time of this game, half game behind Tennessee, and we move to Sunday. Ravens just look so bad.
No,
but they keep winning.
Yeah, that Thursday night game was just awful.
And I do want to remind everybody, horrific weather conditions for several games, very high wind, some precipitation. The wind is a massive, massive factor. So we expected not to have the best looking football, and we got this. Baltimore 17-9 win over the Falcons in Baltimore. Very cold game, very, very breezy game on this one. Ravens haven't looked good in 3 or 4 weeks without Lamar Jackson, but they haven't gotten bit too badly. They lost to Cleveland, but win this one. Desmond Ridder does not look ready for the NFL, but the rookie has some time to season in the offseason. He's going to get the last couple of starts as well. 5-10. They're right now last place in that sorry NFC South. 2 games behind Tampa. They're I think they're eliminated, but if not, they're on their last breath with hope in that division. With the Jets loss, the Ravens actually clinched a playoff spot on Thursday night, but this win keeps them in discussion. They're only a game behind Cincinnati exiting this week. Big contest looming in week 18. The Ravens have a win next week, and they set up basically a play-in game for the division title. It's going to be a very good matchup in the first round.
And when you look at this game fantasy-wise, when Tyler Aguilar and Drake London are your top players, that tells you absolutely everything. you need to know about Atlanta's day. Hint, it was not good. Ritter was not even a QB2 in the loss, so it's fitting that, yes, they were eliminated from the picture with this loss. Huntley also was surprisingly disappointing fantasy wise in the loss, but he did get the only touchdown on the team. Edwards had some good PPR. Dobbins clocked in with 59 yards, better day than Andrews by a bit. But yeah, just Ravens seem to have a lot of close wins flying.
Yeah, they've been getting the job done on defense. You got to think with Lamar Jackson coming back at some point, he will come back at some point. They're going to be a dangerous out in the playoffs. They could be the 3 seed. They could be the 5 or 6 seed. I don't think they can fall. They could technically fall behind Miami. It just seems unlikely at this point. They're going to be a tough out for whoever they play. I don't think there's a team in the AFC playoffs you're looking at as a pushover like you're going to have in the NFC with whoever gets in that 6-7 seed range and the NFC South champion. Even if the Jaguars come out in the AFC South, they've been playing so well, they're not going to be an easy out as well. But Ravens, a lot of good things in very bad play. They've been getting the job done. Mark Andrews for fantasy has been abysmal. That's bad.
Understatement.
Next up, the Panthers 37-23 win over the Detroit Lions, drops the Lions to 7-8. The Lions were, if they'd have won this game, been in the playoffs at the end of the day, but they've come up short. The Panthers with the win set up a very big game with Tampa on Sunday. Tampa wins that game. They win the NFC South. It's all said and done. They've already swept the Saints, so the Saints can't jump them. The Panthers win. They'll have swept the Buccaneers. The Saints game will have some impact there as they're playing Philadelphia. We don't expect good things. That NFC South could get interesting real fast, but that's a big game. The Panthers just dominant on the ground. At one point, I think it was 8 carries for 150 or so yards between Chuba Hubbard and Deonta Foreman. And the Lions just couldn't get the job done stopping the run. Lions come back a little bit late to make some fantasy days a little bit brighter. Jared Goff was solid. Amon-Ra St. Brown, not terrible. If you were playing Zylstra, you had 3 touchdowns, but I don't think anybody was. So that's a damn shame for everybody out there because you were hoping for Swift. You were hoping for Williams. You were hoping for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Only really paid off for Jared Goff. Yeah. Lions half game out of that 8 seed. They are win out pretty much, and they will get in. They do need a Commanders loss at one of the last 2 games, but it's going to come down to week 18 against the Packers for them, I believe. But Panthers, a big win to keep their season alive. They looked a lot better since they got rid of Matt Rule and Christian McCaffrey, oddly enough.
Because with this game where you have Atlanta being knocked out of the playoffs, their NFC South rival Carolina, of course, hosted the Lions and just absolutely stunned them. 321 yards. That got Carolina's interim head coach Steve Wilks a very nice congrats from Detroit head coach Dan Campbell, who you definitely have to like his attitude when he just got his butt kicked and he's telling the opposing coach that was a great bleep kicking. So you just have to like this guy and hope they keep him around in the NFL for a while. So as you mentioned, of course, Zylstra was the that helped no one candidate. And hopefully, if you're in either third place game or a championship game, maybe took a waiver wire on him. As just the disappointments were unfortunately all the usual suspects. Of course, Deontay Foreman had one of his best weeks, if not his best week yet, pumping out just insane numbers. Darnold was a good fill-in if you had Jalen Hurts issues, cough cough, and but just one of the biggest disappointments once again is he really over the injury. DeAndre Swift just hey, on the other hand, Williams didn't exactly have a good day either. So just not exactly what you would call a good day for Detroit rushing.
Yeah, and Williams comes up with a little bit of an injury. So DeAndre Swift, an interesting play in week 17. All right, then we go to one of the worst weather games of the weekend. Very high winds for this one. Buffalo 35-13 win over the Chicago Bears. Josh Allen, Justin Fields got the job done well enough in fantasy, but there wasn't a whole lot here for the passing game. If you were relying on Stephon Diggs, you were sorely disappointed. Dawson Knox with a late touchdown. Gabe Davis with a touchdown did save. If you played both of them, you had some good luck there. David Montgomery was okay. Nothing spectacular here. Khalil Herbert back from injury. Nothing to be real substantial here to talk about. Bills 12-3. Win out,
Yeah.
they get the number 1 seed. They play Cincinnati on Monday night in a game that's going to determine many, many, many fantasy football championships, including one of mine. My dynasty league is a super flex. My two starting quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I won't know anything until that game hits triple zeros in the end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I didn't have a real lot on this game as the go-getters for Buffalo. Of course, you mentioned Allen, Singletary, Cook. Everyone else just as yeah. And then for Chicago, Fields had the only touchdown, and Montgomery didn't even break RB2 numbers. It's just Chicago had a bad day. They had a bad season.
Chicago, though, a great situation going into next year. They have good draft capital. They have a ton of cap space, and it looks like they've got a legitimate quarterback one in Justin Fields. The Bills, Devin Singletary was a very good contributor this time of the year last year. He seems poised to do it again when it matters most. So maybe Devin Singletary, a league winner for the second year in a row. Then we go to the worst weather game of the week. This had
Oh,
sustained
buddy.
winds in the mid 30s with gusts expected to get in the 50s and 60s. I don't know if we actually saw that level of gusts, at least not in the stadium, but the Saints Browns game 17-10. This had an over under at kickoff about 32 points, and they hit the under because the weather was that bad.
Easily.
You didn't expect much from fantasy performers here. Amari Cooper was decent. Alvin Kamara could have been a lot worse, and that was pretty much it. Horrifically heavy wind is a death sentence for fantasy production and high scoring games. The Browns have not looked as good as they did with Jacoby Brissett since Deshaun Watson became the starter. This is kind of an extended test run, preseason-esque situation for Deshaun Watson, not having played in so long. This is to get him back up to game speed, get him familiar with his offense. The Saints, 6-9. They need the Bucks to lose out because they've lost the tiebreaker, are still alive to win the division. If they can win out, Carolina beats Tampa, and I think both teams have to lose Tampa and Carolina in week 18, which is doable. But the Saints somehow still kicking in that playoff picture, which is terrifying. The Browns are officially eliminated.
Yeah, because best week for Alvin Kamara since week 8 is he has definitely disappointed managers greatly since the 42-point explosion against the Raiders. And also, speaking of disappointment, Taysom Hill, you were hoping for a bang from the buck. Yeah, he didn't exactly get you what you thought, not even a QB2. Dalton, oh my good God, was far worse, getting a little bit more than half a point. Can we say that again, Flying?
Yeah,
half a point. So my commiserations if anyone had a role with Dalton this week. I bet you were pulling out your hair and yelling at the screen and yelling at other inanimate objects. As oh, and then Juwan Johnson, of course, probably dropped by many managers. But if you are somehow still playing next week, keep in mind, as Flyan said, the Storm just played absolute havoc with all these games. So you might do better next week, especially you think who they're playing. So yeah, just a snafu of a game for Cleveland. You just pretty much Cooper and Watson. That was it. Awful game fantasy, awful game in reality.
Yeah, Chubb disappointing. Donovan Peoples-Jones a non-factor. The Browns are pretty much packing it in for this season, is playing for pride and to get some experience for Deshaun Watson on this offense and with this team. Saints, though, still do somehow have a lot to play for. Next up, the Chiefs 24-10 win over Seattle. A good game from Travis Kelce, but against Seattle, I think you were hoping for a little bit better. Pat Mahomes is still Pat Mahomes. If you played Marquise Goodwin, that one hurt. A big 0 on the scoreboard. Fortunately, where I played him, it didn't cost me the win, or I got blown out by way more than he could have ever imagined possibly getting in the fantasy roster, so it didn't kill me. But there are some people that said Marquise Goodwin, no Tyler Lockett, going to come in, going to have an opportunity. Not so much. Jerick McKinnon stepped back from what he's been in the last couple of weeks. You will see this with the Chiefs. It looks like Isaiah Pacheco was a little bit better this week. The Chiefs 12-3. Right now are the 2 seed. They win out. They have a very easy schedule the rest of the way relative to the rest of their competition. Win out, you can be no worse than the 2 seed, and if Cincinnati can help you out, or New England the last week of the season, they still can get the number 1 seed.
Because when Geno Smith has the only touchdown of the day, that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the Hawks' loss. Kelsey did his damage with PPR, buck 13. McKinnon and Tony had the others as Casey just beat the ever living crap out of Seattle, who's still alive for playoffs, and they have a quote unquote easy schedule, but never look past the Raiders or Broncos, who
Yeah.
both can surprise when you least expect it.
Broncos put up a good fight the last time against Kansas City. If Russell Wilson didn't get knocked out, that could be a closer game. Even this week is in Kansas City, though. It's not going to be as easy. All right, next up, Vikings 27-24 win over the New York Giants. The Vikings just keep getting it done. Justin Jefferson, 209 yards away from the NFL record for receiving yards in the season. Given week 17, he's got a very good chance of breaking it with the extra game in week 18. But against Green Bay, this could be an absolute shootout. He could get the record next week, which would be impressive because that means he did the same number of games as Calvin Johnson. Giants losing falls to 8-6-1. Fortunately for them, the Seahawks and the Lions behind them lost, so there's still a good game and a half up. They would have to lose out to put themselves at a whole lot of risk of not making the playoffs. So a Giants win or losses by Seattle, Green Bay, and Detroit would lock them in, as well as one to the by the Washington Commanders. So Giants look like they're going to make the playoffs. Vikings 12-3 still have hopes at the number one seed. They still have to win out. Philly has to lose out. We'll see what goes on with Jalen Hurts this week against New Orleans. He's going to push to play, but no guarantees he will be back. Keep it in the back of your mind. If you have Jalen Hurts and you're still around and he's still on your bench because you shouldn't have cut him, he could be the savior you need next week. Vikings, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins have been exceptional. You probably have some of them in your fantasy lineups if you're in a championship game or you're playing against them this week. So best of luck there.
Yeah, because Saquon Barkley, of course, led the way for the G-men in the close loss. Daniel Jones, choice for Hurts manager, one of the choices for Hurts managers this week, putting up solid QB2 numbers, almost QB1 numbers after Jones had a surprising name that showed up on the fantasy radar. Isaiah Hodgkins, not rostered in the 16-team league and only rostered in 2% of leagues. The Giants take on Indy in week 17, so he might be worth a waiver if your championship rolls through week 17. He did not have a presence on the team really until about week 8, only about two double-digit weeks, 13 and 14. Another name on there, Richie James, was rostered in the 16-team league and rostered in 17% of Yahoo leagues, but I think I would advise a little bit more caution on James. While he has had some good weeks, he actually has had 2 weeks where he has cost his managers points, but Minnesota gets her done again as a big time congrats if you started TJ Hawkinson, had his second best week of the year. Kirk Cousins doing Kirk Cousins things. Justin Jefferson doing JJ things, 31 fantasy points. Bit of a disappointment for Dalvin Cook, who's had an up and down December. This week, definitely down. And interesting thing, for some reason, I don't think Adam Thielen really likes playing in New York because he had an equal dismal performance against the Jets, but Minnesota gets her done, and Giants are slowly kind of looking up from the abyss.
Yeah, it doesn't take much for them to make it, but they still have to get the job done. Vikings just look very, very good. And Hawkinson has been great for the Vikings. All right, next up, this one looked like it was going to be a rout early, but the Bengals hold on to win 22-18 against the New England Patriots. The Patriots missing field goals and extra points really cost them this game. The Bengals getting the job done. Joe Mixon, a decent performance. Joe Burrow, very good as well. T. Higgins, a great performance. The Patriots, 7-8, have to win on Sunday against Miami to have any shot at the playoffs. If they lose, they'll be 2 back and have been swept, so they'll be out of it with a loss. The Bengals, though, look like a team that is poised to run. If they can beat Buffalo on Monday night, they have aspirations at the 1 seed still. They've already beaten Kansas City. Just need Kansas City to stumble.
Also does need, yeah, as with for Cincinnati, you had T. Higgins leading the way as Cincy, of course, held off New England with the best week of the year. Joe Burrow was second. Third player was a bit of a surprise. Trenton Irwin might be a bit of a dart throw. I would caution is sustainability unless you really need a wide receiver. Mixon, of course, kept out of the end zone. Perine, not even flex numbers. This was clearly a Mixon game. And Ja'Marr Chase was also surprisingly a bust as far as fantasy football goes. And then New England, the best player, got everyone by surprise. Kendrick Bourne, probably available, but another one I would advise caution as New England plays Miami and Buffalo. So could be a good toss up, but just remember who's in charge of the Patriots offense. So Jacob B. Myers, I think the GOAT of Week 15, redeemed himself. Matt Jones had a good start, having his best week in December. Everyone, including Stevenson, was pretty much a bust.
Yeah, Stevenson was awful this week as well. All right, moving on.
This one's easy.
Oh, man, the Titans are just in free fall. The Texans, 19-14 win over the Titans. Everybody in the AFC South is now below 500. It's the Jaguars and Titans both at 7-8. The Texans moved to 2-12-1. Derrick Henry was good in this game, and that was about it. Malik Willis did get the start and was not great. Did have a rushing touchdown in this one, but the Texans, they've hung tough several times this season, including each of the last 2 weeks. They finally get over the hump and get a win. They've now beaten the Texans and Jaguars on the season, who one of those will definitely win the division. As we said, win and in week number 18 game between the two of them. Texans now do not have the guarantee on that number one overall pick, only a half game in front of Chicago for first overall in the draft.
Yeah, this game was just as a Houston easy fantasy wise cooks. That's pretty much it. Very very short, infinitesimally small list. For Tennessee, just garbage loss. Fantasy wise, horrid. As you mentioned, Henry was pretty much it for Tennessee, and Malik Willis maybe as a desperation play. My one question is, how the bleep did Tennessee lose this?
Something's wrong in Tennessee. They don't have A.J. Brown. They don't have a good passing game. Ryan Tannehill hurt. They didn't have a good quarterback. And the Texans said, you're not beating us with Derrick Henry. That's the long and the short of it. They just didn't have the talent on the field this week. We'll see long-term what happens with Ryan Tannehill in Nashville for the Titans. He could be someone who's moved on from, if they want to say, let's just see what we've got in Willis, and if we're bad, we'll get in a quarterback in 2024. All right, next up, 49ers 37-20 win over the Washington Commanders. Christian McCaffrey is very, very good. So is George Kittle. Back-to-back great games. Brock Purdy has looked every bit of serviceable since he's gotten in the lineup. The Commanders, they did not fare well in this one. Carson Wentz got some time at the end. No big surprise that Washington lost to the Niners. They have been on an absolute tear, have not lost a game since they've acquired Christian McCaffrey. The Niners keep rolling. Washington, 7-1, currently holding on to that number 7 seat in the NFC, but breathing down their necks. Detroit, Seattle, and Green Bay. We'll see if Washington can hold on, but it's not going to be an easy task the rest of the way.
Yeah, for Washington, you had Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel was third. They all had TDs. Robinson and Gibson were absolute busts this week, as Washington should steal a win from Cleveland, but I think Dallas might be a bit of a tough nut to crack. And for San Francisco, it was the Kittle, Purdy, CMC, and Ray show. It's all like it's Groundhog Day, as Ray had a good week against KC in Week 7, but hasn't really been on the fantasy radar other than that, just rostered in 1% of leagues. But San Francisco is such a good offense that you might be worth a dart throw, because it's like Kansas City. Whoever they plug in, they just win. And just absolutely crazy. So, yeah, I don't know if you would take a shot at him or not. But, hey, with the way Week 17 is shaping up to be, who the heck knows?
I want to remind everybody, Rex Burkhead was a league winner last year. Rashad Penny was a league winner last year. And some of these guys weren't even on rosters going into week 15 or 16. So Ray-Ray McCloud, probably not your best bet. Keep an eye on the Deebo Samuel news, but you never know. I mean, he can get 2 long touchdowns. Look at someone like for the Saints, Raheem Shaheed. Big play potential, can get 2 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. And all of a sudden, he sets you up with 30-plus fantasy points, and you're very, very happy with the decision. So it's not the worst thing to look at guys like this that have the big play potential, but understand, a dart throw is a dart throw for a reason. Some of these guys will hit, but the vast majority will not. All right, let's move to the game of the week. Dallas 40-34 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's start with Gardner Minshew. Looked very good. I think he could start for probably a half dozen to a dozen teams in the NFL. Eagles just not quite good enough today or over the weekend. CeeDee Lamb, big game. Ezekiel Elliott with a touchdown for it seems like the 8th or 9th, 10th, 20th, 500 straight game. He's just not stoppable right now. Tony Pollard was solid in this one. Dak Prescott had a good game. Pretty much anybody not named Miles Sanders was at least decent in this one. Miles Sanders continues to plague fantasy managers who are relying on him all season long. But other than that, yeah, Goddard looked decent in his return. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith looked like the favorite target for Gardner Minshew. So a lot of fantasy goodness here. Keep an eye on the Jalen Hurts news. But if Minshew goes again next week, it's not the worst thing for you. He was very good in relief. The Cowboys, 11-4, still have aspirations to possibly, can they even catch up to the Eagles? I don't know. But still have hopes to win that division if at all possible. The Eagles fall for the second time in division, which is why the Cowboys still have a shot here.
Yeah, because the fantasy bus definitely for Philadelphia were Sanders and Gainwell. If you had a sort of a dart throw play for him, and for Dallas, just kind of surprisingly, Dalton Schultz disappointed greatly this week, and Pollard, Gallup, and Elliott all okay for fantasy. It's just okay, nothing all the great. And the moment of the game definitely had to be Devonta Smith when he did the thing that he was breaking into the Salvation Army touchdown celebration. I was going, okay, that was gold.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff in this game. Cowboys, a big game against Tennessee tomorrow night. No Derrick Henry, so you got to think that bodes well for them. Eagles, the Saints are scrappy. They don't feel like a team that should be competitive with Philadelphia right now. But if it's Gardner Minshew, it is a backup. It's not the MVP candidate in Jalen Hurts. So maybe the Dallas Cowboys still can get it done. They are 2 back with 2 to go. They would win the division if they went out and the Eagles lose out. Seems unlikely, but it's still on the table. All right, then we go to the Saturday night game between the Steelers and the Raiders, what was supposed to be a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. In the joyous retirement of Franco Harris's number, turned into a little bit of a depressing halftime as Harris had passed away earlier in the week. At halftime, the Raiders looked like they were going to hold on to this game. The Steelers, I don't know if it was emotion or what, come back in the second half. They get the job done, get the win over the Raiders. Steelers 7-8 do still have an outside shot at the playoffs, but it's going to take wins next week against Baltimore and week 18 against Cleveland to even be in the discussion, let alone all the stuff in front of them that's got to fall right. Miami's got to pretty much lose out because they've lost head-to-head to Miami. They cannot end up in a tie with them. New England, the Jets. I mean, there's a lot of teams there. Raiders, giving up on Derek Carr. I'm telling you, he's not going to be back unless something goes horrifically out of whack for the Raiders next season. He's done. He's not going back. Josh Jacobs didn't look great in this one. Najee Harris has been looking better of late, but this one, a tough, cold, windy night. So Steelers, big win, 7-8, still have a shot at a winning record or a non-losing record if they can get a tie one of these weeks. Trying to prevent that. That's about the most they have to play for, though, right now.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it's kind of a fitting karmically as a week flying after winning in the most bizarre way possible. The Raiders lose with 50 seconds left on the game clock. Steelers definitely, as you mentioned, with the emotion, had to be playing for Franco Harris. For Las Vegas, it was pretty much Renfro, and that is it. For Pittsburgh, in this order: Pickens, Harris, Pickett, Freiermuth, Jackson, Horde game in reality, and in fantasy. And if you haven't seen that Josh Jacobs clip about him expressing how shall we say, displeasure with the Raiders franchise, it's definitely worth a gander because it's like, he ain't happy.
Josh Jacobs is one of a very large pool of pending running back free agents going into next season. Expect him to have a very lucrative deal on the table wherever he goes. He's been great this season. I think that Raiders team is in for even worse times ahead, even though they've got Devontae Adams under contract. All right, let's go to Devontae Adams' former team, the Green Bay Packers, on Sunday, on Christmas Day. Go to Miami and get a win. They are the Grinch for the Dolphins. Should have locked up the playoffs this week. With a win, they would have, but they did not get it done. Tua leaves this game, doesn't leave the game, but exits the game, or exits Sunday, somehow concussed, still not 100% sure where that occurred, but the Packers down 20-13 at halftime, shut the Dolphins up in the second half. Great performances by Alan Lazard was good in this one. Christian Watson left with an injury, but was good before that. Jalen Waddle, 84-yard touchdown, very, very fast. Him and Tyreek Hill, both over 100 yards, again, receiving. The Packers, they got everything they wanted this weekend. Seattle lost, Detroit lost, Washington lost, the Giants lost. They needed all of those things, not all of them, most of those things, plus a win to keep their playoff hopes alive. They play the Minnesota Vikings next week. Minnesota can end the Packers season with a win and some things going the wrong way for the Packers, but the Packers could end the Vikings shot at the number 1 overall seed. So both teams have a lot to play for themselves and to ruin the other team's season. The Dolphins, 8-7, going to New England next week. Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. Fortunately, and I do mean this, fortunately they're playing the Patriots and not the Jets. I think the Jets getting Mike White back are going to be a much better team than they are with Zach Wilson, whereas the Patriots the last few weeks have been giving games away in ways you don't expect from a Bill Belichick coach team. The Packers, 15-0 under Matt LaFleur in December. They're not going to get another December game. Next one's going to be in January, so we'll see if they can keep it rolling into January, but 2 home games in the division for their playoffs lives. I don't hate the position they're in, and if I'm going to bet on a quarterback when you're looking at Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Geno Smith, or Aaron Rodgers, I'm putting my money on Rodgers 1,000% of the time.
Yeah, this was a good game in reality. Not so much for fantasy as Green Bay was pretty much everyone on the offense was balanced, and that's great in reality, but really sucky in fantasy as you had 2 surprising duds, Aaron Jones and Randall Cobb. So you're probably scratching your head if you started them. Meanwhile, on the flip side of the coin, well, Green Bay had a fantastic December. Miami went 0 for 4. Waddle won many weeks. Tyreek Hill came down from Mount Olympus as immortal this week, not doing badly, but not exactly what you would expect from him. As Hill had good weeks in the slump, 13, 14, 15, but definitely let managers down this week as Hill's day was plagued by Tua's multi-turnover day, and so many fish were pedestrian day. Wilson, Raheem Mostert was a total bust, and Miami, Brian, your team needs to reverse their fortunes and quickly.
Yeah. They need to not abandon the run game next week. They were actually running the ball very well against Green Bay, and they just stopped. Then Tua started throwing picks in that fourth quarter, and they just couldn't get the offense restarted. The Packers.
Yeah, what's going on with Mostert and all of a sudden just why was he just so ineffective?
He had 30 yards in the first 2 carries. He only got 8 in the entire game. He had 2 carries in the first drive, was pacing this offense, and they just went away from him. Jeff Wilson, it's going to be a timeshare. That's how Miami's going to operate. They're going to operate like San Francisco. Mike McDaniels is from that system, so don't be surprised if it's 8-9 like it was this week, but they need to run the ball more. They have great weapons in the backfield as well at wide receiver. I know you want to get Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill the ball as much as possible. Find creative ways. Find jet sweeps. Find those little pop passes that Pat Mahomes has been doing 2 inches in front of the quarterback and let them go. But utilize those running backs to get that offense or that defense brought up to the line so you can go over the top and try and get Tyreek or Waddle. They're explosive. This is the silver lining with the Dolphins situation right now. Teddy Bridgewater's capable, and Jalen Waddle's 84-yard touchdown was on a 15-yard pass. Tyreek Hill can break one from anywhere on the field. And the Patriots have been playing so poorly of late. They match what the Dolphins have been doing. So if you're a Dolphins fan, you're getting the right team at the right time to play with Teddy Bridgewater. Not a guarantee. I think if we had Tua at full health, we would both be very confident saying the Patriots are going to lose this game. Miami's going to get the ship righted. And at worst, have a best play-in game against the Jets in Week 18, depending on the Jets' outcome. But there's a lot of doubt now with Miami, with Tua out, and how the team's been playing. Positive, though, Dolphins' defense did hold up pretty well. first kickoff return by Nixon brought the Packers inside the 10, held them to a field goal. They had some bad, those turnovers late, put some points on the board for the Packers, but they held them to field goals a lot more often than you would expect. So, I kind of hope the Packers Lions game is a win and in game next week, but the Packers got to get the job done. All right, let's move on to the next game on Sunday.
Next up, a game for the ages or not.
Well, one piece of news we didn't talk about was Nathaniel Hackett getting fired. He is gone. Why is he gone, Joel?
Well, okay. So you could just sort of go down the list. You ended up having pretty much last week or the week before, you had a defensive player come over and look like they were chewing out Russell Wilson. And the one question that goes through your mind is, why is a player doing that and not the head coach? Then we fast forward to this week. You had players literally almost going at it on the sidelines for the Denver Broncos, not the other team's players coming over. This was on the same team. You then had one little bit of this histrionics from Cortland Sutton when he was obviously wide open. Russell Wilson didn't see it. He just threw his hands up in the air, like sort of like, dude, what are you doing? Just dude has absolutely lost the team. And then, of course, one of the dumbest quotes I think I've ever heard from a head coach when they were playing the Raiders, when Nathaniel Hackett said, well, somebody has to win this game. It's like, dude, why not say, hey, why don't we have a chance of winning this game? Why do you say somebody can win this game? So I'm honestly surprised. Oh, and then I forgot. He hired an assistant to help him with making decisions. Making decisions is your job as a head coach. I'm honestly surprised it took him this long to fire him, Brian.
Yeah, the nail in the coffin, on top of all that, was making Baker Mayfield look like, Joe Montana, and making Cam Akers look like Barry freaking Sanders. Cam Akers hasn't looked like a running back serviceable in the NFL most of his career, let alone since his Achilles injury. Has been good. He was good last week, where he knocked me out of the 16-team playoff because he got 12 points and was like, damn it, he had a good week. 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards, and didn't look stoppable this week against the Broncos. Tyler Higbee, 2 receiving touchdowns. Baker Mayfield was great. The Denver defense got shredded, and Russell Wilson was throwing picks like it was candy at trick-or-treaters. Like, it was absurd. It got so bad that Patrick Starr was mocking the Broncos on Nickelodeon, because this was a Nickelodeon game. It was abysmal. When you have an animated character talking crap about your team, you gots to go. And Nathaniel Hackett is fired. 51-14 win for the Rams. The Rams looked like, well, the team that won the Super Bowl last year, and they clearly are not, but the Broncos just looked like they do not have a clue on what needs to be done. Russell Wilson right now is playing like the worst full-time starting quarterback in football, with the other exception maybe being Zach Wilson, if you consider him a starter. Right now, I would take Sam Darnold. I would take Carson Wentz. I would take almost any quarterback you can name who is a full-time starter. I'm not talking your Nick Foles. I'm not talking anybody who's filling in Desmond Ridder right now. I'd take Marcus Mariota healthy in a heartbeat.
Can you imagine some poor sap on their fantasy team who has Russell Wilson and Zach Wilson as their backup?
There are dynasty rosters that have Russell Wilson and Zach Wilson, and if it's super flex, they hopefully have someone else that's valuable. But the Broncos 4-11. That Seattle Seahawks pick is getting better all the time, and it's just so bad right now.
Hashtag let's ride.
Yeah, right now the Seahawks would have the number 3 overall pick, stemming from the Russell Wilson trade.
The let's ride, I imagine, would be, if you ever remember the song on George of the Jungle, watch out for that, watch out for that tree. Boom, the Broncos are the dude running into the tree.
Yeah. It's been bad. Denver has been bad. And yes, they've been very injured. Javonte Williams on IR. Cortland Sutton's been in and out of the lineup. Jerry Jeudy's been in and out of the lineup. I think they have the most guys on IR in any team in the league. But I mean, we saw this with the Ravens last year. They struggled, but they were around 500. They were in playoff contention because they had good pieces at Lamar Jackson with, you know, everybody on that team pulled together and got enough of the job done. And I would say the Broncos have better pieces than the Ravens did last year, and they're just abysmal. I don't know what Denver does. I honestly don't. You've got Russell Wilson. You are stuck. You signed him to a massive extension and gave up what's going to be a top 5 pick at absolute worst or absolute best for a guy who just, it seems like can't get the job done. Now, maybe it's Hackett. Maybe it's a bad offense. It's a bad scheme. It's a badly run franchise as Joel disappears. Maybe, just maybe, a head coaching change next year. Maybe he gets a little more healthy. I think he's still stemming from that hand injury last year. I think he's still not 100%. Maybe, just maybe, he gets back on track. I don't know. But long term, you're not happy if you're a Broncos fan and you have Russell Wilson. It's just tough. But I'm hopeful for him and the Broncos who spent all this money, spent all this draft capital, that you can get a head coach. Maybe they go and find a way to get Sean Payton from the Saints. Because remember, you have to trade for Sean Payton. You cannot just sign him. Or maybe you find the next Mike McDaniel offensive guru that's got maybe he's got the right personality to mesh with this team. But right now, the Broncos look like they are in the worst shape of any team in the NFL going beyond this year.
Even worse than the Texans.
You look at Houston; they've got draft capital, they've got cap space, they've got they've got some pieces. Laramie Tunsil wants to reset the offensive tackle market, so that could be a big cap departure that adds to their ability to make some moves. And they've got some younger pieces: Nico Collin, Damian Pierce. I mean, if they can get a quarterback, couple other good players around them, this could be, I'm not saying a contender, but a 5, 6, 7 win team next year on as a surprise. But right now you're looking at Denver going, are you going to get Javonte Williams back and all of a sudden become great? No, this is a great defense that is getting destroyed. They have been beaten down, so mentally fatigued by having to carry this team. What was the stat? If the Broncos had scored 18 in regulation, they'd have had been 9-2, 10-2 at one point. That's hard after a full season to see how that goes. So Broncos, embarrassing. We'll get to the Super Bowl of Suck. That Colts Broncos Super Bowl of Suck matchup did not disappoint. Anyways, we'll move on to your Tampa Bay Buccaneers 19-16 win over the Trace McSorley led Arizona Cardinals. And I don't know how you come out of that game as a Bucs fan and feel good about things. You do get the win, but you were down 16-6 late in that game. Tom Brady, he sold his soul to the devil. I mean, he really has. So he gets the job done. But, oh, boy, James Conner looked very good for the Cardinals. DeAndre Hopkins, 1 catch on 10 targets because, well, Trace McSorley can't throw the ball real well. Greg Dortch with a good game for the Cardinals. Mike Evans still continuing to struggle for a fantasy option, and Chris Godwin not great once again. Leonard Fournette looked a lot better than he had in the last few weeks, but Bucks 7-8, first place in the division, a win to clinch the NFC South. They can beat the Carolina Panthers, and at least in the playoffs. But that, as far as draft pick goes, might work against them.
Yeah, as you were saying, not a lot of options as far as Arizona goes. As McSorley wasn't even at QB2. That's how bad a night he had.
Bad.
And for Tampa Bay, Brady did it again and Suckup came through. But keep in mind, because you said, if you're a Bucs fan, how do you feel good about this? Keep in mind, this was a struggle against one of the worst defenses in the league. Because before the game happened, I'm going, okay, well, I know Arizona isn't good. I think they were like 28th or something as far as defenses go. So I'm thinking Bucs should absolutely run and pass all crazy over them. It was clearly a Fournette day, which if started Rashawn White in fantasy like I did,
it's not a great day for you.
Yeah, because White sniped the TD, but Fournette clearly had the more volume of snaps, and that is never a good formula for fantasy. Godwin, of course, was the main man again, along with Gage, as Evans had a little bit of a better day, but still, Evans, Otten, and Jones, they were absolute busts. And as you mentioned, if the Bucks beat the Panthers, they win the division. But uh, I I just don't know what to make of this offense that looked like utter complete yeah for 3 quarters, and somehow they flip a switch. And once again, keep in mind this is against one of the worst defenses of the entire league. So, what are they going to do against the Panthers next week, who beat them last time?
Soundly beat them
Yeah,
soundly
yeah. I
last
mean,
time.
they pummeled the Bucks. So I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I would not be surprised with Carolina ended up winning the division. I mean, I think Brady can have one more last gasp at least in Tampa, but this year has been an utter up and down, just completely just all over the place. You don't know what identity this Bucks team has. It's totally, completely night and day between Arians, who had complete control of the team, and Bowles, who's just, yeah, he's quiet. He's a nice guy. I'm not sure that's exactly a good uh, personality to have for a coach.
I don't think Todd Bowles is a head coach. I think he's a great defensive coordinator, and that's where he needs to stay. Um,
Because I know because Tony Dungy was quiet, but he had a presence about him. I don't think Bowles has that same presence.
yeah, Tony Dungy was just a very unique coach, and I get that people want to replicate Tony Dungy if they can, but it's real tough there. Remember, the Bucks have had to come back late in games against the Rams, the
Not a good
Saints,
team.
the
Saints not a
Cardinals.
good team.
I mean, they've had to come from behind. This is very close to a 4-11 team in their own right. And I might be forgetting matchups that they've won that they had to come from behind earlier in the season when you think, oh, Tampa's still pretty good. I mean, they struggled the first game against the Saints, was 3-3 into the fourth quarter, and they got hot again at the end. Now, if you're a Tampa Bay fan, Tom Brady is a big lights gamer. When the lights are brightest, he's going to come out and show up. So maybe if you get in the playoffs, you play Dallas, Dallas chokes. So you might make a decent run in the playoffs, which only hurts your draft pick. The questions around Tom Brady are: is he going to come back? And if so, is he going to come back with Tampa Bay? There's
Well,
rumors of the Saints getting Sean Payton to come back and Brady go to New
well, yeah,
Orleans.
yeah, because I've heard that even somebody bring up, well, what about Sean Payton going to Tampa? And I don't think there's any chance in bleep that the Saints would let that happen within the division. They would
No.
make the price so high for the Bucks to try to trade for Sean Payton, they wouldn't be able to.
Now
Uh,
it might be worth it given how Bruce Arians led this team to the Super Bowl, and I think Sean Payton objectively is a better coach than
well,
Bruce Arians.
the Bucks did trade for a coach, John Gruden, long, long time ago from the Raiders. That worked out pretty well. We got the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's going to be tough in division, but
And
Cardinals waiting for the season to end.
there's also another scenario for Brady that may seem a little bit more viable, I think, than winding up with Sean Payton is, of course, winding up with the Raiders and his old coordinator, Josh McDaniels, because the two know each other and Brady knows McDaniels' offensive scheme. So that's a crazy possibility. Stranger things have happened. What are the chances, do you think, of that happening?
I think a lot of this is going to come down to what happens with Tampa in the playoffs and what happens with Todd Bowles. If he is retained as the head coach, I don't think Brady wants to be a part of this. He would go to a team like the Raiders. He would go to a team like the Saints. He might even go to a team like the Falcons or the Panthers in division. I mean, there's enough need. There's rumors about him going back to New England. I don't think that happens. I think that ended too poorly. But
Yeah, I don't think there's any love lost between Belichick and Brady.
I wonder if a team like Detroit that you might look at going, you know what, if we had someone a little better than Goff, we would be 9-10 wins right now. They look at a guy like Brady and say, this is a finishing piece. Let's make a run now. I don't know. Tom Brady, I don't think is retiring because, well, he has no reason to now. He's not married. His wife doesn't care because she's off in Brazil living her best life. And yeah, I think he's going to play. I just don't know if it's with Tampa Bay. If they get someone else in place of Todd Bowles and he likes that option, maybe he stays. But a lot to be determined there. All right, then we go to the Monday Nighter. Chargers 20-3 win over the Colts. The Chargers clinch the an AFC wild card spot. They look pretty comfortably in that number 6 slot. They could move up to 5, could move up to 7, but really need things to break perfectly for either of those to happen. The Colts, that's just a bad team, bad situation. Nick Foles, not the answer. Matt Ryan, not the problem here. I think it goes beyond that. Offensive line's been hurt all year. No Jonathan Taylor. I think the wide receiving core has not been as advertised as what they had hoped. Obviously, Jeff Saturday is not a head coach going forward. Defense has been okay at times, but they've blown some big leads, including the worst in NFL history. But that could be a Matt Ryan problem. Now let's talk about the Chargers. Justin Herbert, bad fantasy week, good on-field NFL week. He looked fantastic, but did not score a touchdown. Austin Eckler with 2 scores. If you played him in fantasy, it hurts you, but he was good for the Chargers. Keenan Allen, a PPR monster with over 100 yards on 10 receptions, so he helped you out big time in a PPR league. No touchdowns again. Mike Williams, 70-something yards on 4 catches. Not too bad, but not as good as you would be hoping for. Chargers, though, win the game, get the playoff spot. They didn't charger it up. We've seen them get close the last few years and not quite over it. Brandon Staley can stretch his way into the postseason.
Yeah, I still see that video and I'm going, okay, dude, what were you thinking? But for the Chargers, it was definitely, as you mentioned, the Eckler-Allen show with a little bit of Williams sprinkled in the mix. Herbert definitely disappointed his managers in fantasy, but in reality, hey, I don't think they really care all that much. The Chargers are ready for the playoffs. Looking at the flip side of the coin, you're not kidding when Indy is a bad team. You look down that fantasy deal for week 16, no one seriously bad offense. The highest player was Zach Moss for 8 points. 8
on
points.
Tons and tons of opportunity too.
Indy is just an absolute cluster of a team. Good God.
Yeah, it's bad. So let's quickly look at the current playoff picture before we go into a Super Bowl suck update and our picks for tomorrow night's game. Bills clinched the division. Right now, the 1 seed in the AFC. The Chiefs have clinched their division and are right now the 2 seed. The Bengals have clinched a playoff spot, but are the 3 seeds. Still have work to do in the division. Also having clinched, the Ravens and the Chargers both clinched, both currently the 5 and 6 seeds. 2 playoff spots still remaining. Right now, the Jaguars holding down the AFC South crown would be the 4 seed. Again, that last game against the Titans is going to be the determining factor here. They play the Texans next week, so you got to think they're going to go into that 8-8 with a chance to get in at a winning record. The Dolphins currently holding that number 7 seed at 8-7. They play the Patriots, who are the 8th seed. So again, not a small game by any stretch of the imagination for those 2 teams. The Dolphins win. They eliminate the Patriots. The Jets lose, who are currently the 9 seed. They play Seattle. The Dolphins would clinch. The Patriots win. They'll split the season series for the Dolphins. I don't know how that tiebreaker works out offhand. The Jets beat the Seahawks. Titans beat the Cowboys. Steelers beat the Ravens. All of a sudden, you've got a cluster at 8-8. Who knows on the wild card? So a lot to play out if the Dolphins lose. Again, 8 seed, Patriots, Jets, Titans, Steelers in that order, all at 7-8. The Raiders still not mathematically eliminated at 6-9, but they are playing the Niners this week, and it's not looking good.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
No, I'm just saying mathematically there's still technically a possibility. Already eliminated from the AFC, the Texans, the Broncos, the Colts, and the Browns.
Bye-bye, Falcons.
Then in the NFC, Eagles, 1 seed, have only clinched the playoffs, still have to get a win or a Dallas loss to clinch the division. The Vikings have clinched the NFC North. They are the 2 seed, 12-3. They'd have to fall apart, or Philly would have to fall apart for them to really move out of that 2 slot. The Niners have clinched the division. They're 11-4. They're not going to finish any worse than the 3 seed. Probably going to stay right there. Also having clinched so far, the Dallas Cowboys at 11-4 are the 5 seed. 3 seeds left to figure out. The 4 seed, Tampa Bay. We've talked about it before. Right now, 7-8. Win against the Panthers. You clinch the division. End of discussion. You lose. Who knows? Saints, Panthers, and Bucks can all be tied at 7-9 after this week. Going into week 18, who knows? Giants, right now the 6th seed, 8-6-1. And the Washington Commanders 7-7-1 hold down the 7 seed, still in contention on the bubble. Seattle Seahawks, Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers in that order, all at 7-8. Panthers still have a shot at the wild card. 6-9, pretty much have to win out and have everything go right. Same with the New Orleans Saints, but both those are in pretty much life support. Saints playing the Eagles, not the best situation for them. Eliminated from the NFC, the Bears, Cardinals, Falcons, and Rams. So,
are the Texans eliminated?
Texans are eliminated, and they were in the Super Bowl of Suck. So let's go to that. We'll start with the NFC because if I tell you the matchups, you can probably tell who won and who lost these. Bears and Panthers was one of the two matchups. The Panthers just pretty much dominated the Lions, where the Bears got destroyed by the Bills. Panthers advance the Bears further in the tournament, so the Bears will go on to play the Cardinals. The Cardinals looked bad against the Buccaneers, and they also faced the Rams this week, which was an absolute juggernaut. There was I don't think if this would have been a tournament of good teams, the Rams would have been knocked out, because 51 points for, 14 against, no turnovers, 4 takeaways, tons of yards, tons of sacks. They got the win. They dominated time of possession. The Rams weren't going to get knocked out with how they played this week. So your NFC Super Bowl of Suck championship game is going to be Bears and Cardinals. Now, I'm going to save Broncos and Colts for last, because that one, that's a juicy one with how bad these two teams are. Texans and Steelers, both teams get the win. Texans are eliminated. The Steelers are who advances because, frankly, they just didn't keep the ball. They are eliminated because their time of possession was 24 seconds less than the Texans.
That's like a fantasy loss.
Yeah, very, very close. The Steelers, though, AFC Championship in the Super Bowl of Suck, and are 7-8 and trying to get a winning record. So that just tells you how this works. And then if I had to ask you, between the Broncos and the Colts, which team advanced, who would you guess? Because both of these teams were rancid. Points for, points against, turnovers and takeaways, and all this it's all mathematical.
I'm going to say Colts.
It's the Broncos. The Broncos were steamrolled by the Rams, but not as close as you might have. They're not as close. Yeah, Broncos got steamrolled. So it would be the Steelers and the Broncos in the AFC, Bears and Cardinals in the NFC for the championship. And then, of course, Week 18 will determine the Super Bowl of Suck champion. But the 2-win Texans are not in it, which they were the favorites going in. So that just shows you that it's anybody's game when you're in the Super Bowl of Suck. Put that aside. Anyways, breaking news on the Derek Carr situation. The Raiders and Derek Carr came to a joint decision that he should go home and not be a distraction for the last 2 weeks of the season. So he was at least involved in the, let me just pack my shit and go. Sorry. Basically, was how that conversation went. Sorry for the language.
Maybe he can squad up with Kyler Murray and do some modern warfare, I guess.
Hey, I mean, they're close by and they're probably friends to an extent. So, yeah, might as well. Anyways, last things last. Dallas goes to Tennessee to play the Tennessee Titans this week. The Titans have a terrible pass defense, so play your CeeDee Lambs, play your Michael Gallups, play your Dak Prescotts and your Dalton Schultzes. I don't think it's a bad enough matchup where you're going to consider benching Elliott or Pollard. They've been too good for too long this season. You're going to fire up pretty much anybody on the Dallas side. For Tennessee, full bench. Derrick Henry's not going to play. Hassan Haskins might be a sneaky if you need somebody in a pinch because, you had Derrick Henry. Now he's not going to play and you didn't have that depth. Maybe you have to go after someone like that, but it's not going to be Ryan Tannehill. You're not going to get passing volume from the Titans, so you can eliminate all the pass catchers and the quarterback right there. I think there's a full bench for Tennessee. That being said, you play everybody from one team and you play no one from the other. Obviously, I'm taking Dallas. I don't think anybody in their right mind who's not a hardcore Titans fan is going to take Tennessee, but Joel, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're going to take Tennessee here.
Okay, I'm daring and crazy sometimes, but I'm definitely not insane. I really don't have a lot of confidence in Tennessee with how they've been floundering. Got to pick Dallas.
Yeah, that would have been a gift wrapped to tie the pick'em standings. Joel at 150, 88 and 2. I am back to 149, 89 and 2. So our pick'ems are getting a little bit closer. My goal is to get into the playoffs and not have to go contrarian just to hopefully pick up a game or two. I'm fine going in one game down if that's what happens. We're going to start the rest of week 17 one game apart because neither one of us is insane and taking the Titans here. Are the Jaguars going to win that division? I feel like it's an inevitability at this point.
Yeah,
the Jaguars are going to win that division.
They just sort of feel like the team of destiny there.
The fun part is it's either going to be the Jaguars winning the division or the Titans at 8-9 if they don't beat Dallas. Because I think Jacksonville handles Houston personally, but Houston's been tough. All right, 15 games more to pick. We'll get to those Friday. Last week of fantasy football, so keep an eye on those lineups. Keep an eye on last-minute news. This is when you can be predatory on the waivers. Go pick up someone your opponent's going to need. If you're not in a championship game, if you have something to play for, like a tiny toilet that's behind me, that my wife can still win, don't go on the waivers day one. Let the championship teams pick their guys, and then you go and get them after. That's just an etiquette thing for me. But yeah, keep an eye on all the rosters. You can go and pick somebody up and screw the other person out of a title. It's over. The fantasy football season's over. It sucks. I don't love it, but still plenty to go. Super Bowl playoffs for the NFL, and then we go to the cold abyss. Then it's the NFL offseason. I've already started my notes for next year because I'm a sadistic person who doesn't have a problem. Definitely doesn't have a problem at all. I've only got like 300 words written for notes to remember from this year about next year. Things that I wish I had done better this year. And I'm in the Megla Bowl top 1370 out of 19,000. So, all right, let me stop rambling and give it to Joel to ramble about his final thought. Joel.
As I just was thinking about, of course, the Denver Broncos and their cluster of a week. And it's just interesting that the main thing that's talking about is apparently Russell Wilson has a private office. He's not a GM. He's not a CEO. He's not a front office employee. He's not a part of the front office. He's a part of the team. You have to wonder about the disconnect. He's not one of the guys, because if you're one of the guys, if you're part of the team, if you're part of the roster, I don't think it's really appropriate. Yeah, I mean, the several parking spaces, that's like, that tends not to bother me as much as a quarterback who has a private office. If you have whoever the new coach is next year, that I think they sort of need to lay down the law with Russell Wilson. It's like, dude, you don't run the team. You're an important part. I mean, if it's somebody like Peyton Manning, who, was actually good at one time, if they were having a better year, if they were heading towards a playoff,
you could have an office.
Yeah, if one of the memes on the internet was not, hey, what does Russell Wilson have more of, bathrooms in his home or touchdowns? If your year was better than that, then maybe an office would be justified. But I seriously think that's something they should put their foot down. Like, dude, you don't need a private office. And that's my final thought.
Yeah. Kind of to piggyback on that, you want to fit in with your team. I play hockey, and a lot of the people I play hockey with don't realize I have like college degrees and a brain that actually functions, because I want to be part of the team. I want to joke around with the guys and have a good relationship. I don't want to be that hoity-toity, I have all this and look how good I am. And that's what Russell Wilson's doing, and I think it shows off with his private office and the disconnect with the rest of the team. So Russell Wilson, get your danger witch and get out of your office. Go down, hang out with the team. Maybe that's why no one came to your freaking birthday party, you overgrown toddler.
Yeah, I know there's an old motivational cheesy quote: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, that's one of them. I'm going to talk about Tua. Obviously, bad situation with a third concussion of the season. This one coming out of pretty much nowhere is more alarming than the first two, because you saw the one in Buffalo against Buffalo the first time, kind of shook his head. They played it off as a back injury. The neurological doctor got fired afterwards because he didn't do his job. 4 days later, Tua gets blasted into the ground. Obviously, dangerous, deadly concussion. The hands gnarled up, the fencing response or whatever it was called, goes to the hospital. He's out multiple weeks. Those two you saw. I'm sure there's a hit from this last game on Sunday that caused this injury that went unnoticed. It went missed because it wasn't obvious in any way other than maybe he made some bad decisions in that second half in the fourth quarter, making bad passes. What's concerning is usually you go, that was the hit. That was the play. I'm concerned that Tua's brain has been damaged to the point where it doesn't take much for him to get a concussion, to have these symptoms. And I'm not talking Tua the player. I'm talking Tua the human being, the one that goes home and has to deal with this 24/7. Tua should be shut down the rest of the year, whether the Dolphins make the playoffs or not. The Dolphins have a great team. They have a very young core, and they have a window that is just opening up now. There's a good chance if you make the playoffs, you're not getting out of the first round, let alone making a deep run to the playoffs. At this point, you have to think of Tua, the human being, before you think of Tua, the player. And I think the Dolphins would be prudent in the offseason to make a run at a Baker Mayfield or a Jimmy Garoppolo or a player that you can go, you are a very capable backup. We want you on our roster because we can't guarantee Tua's health. He's had health issues in the past with a hand, now the hip, and now the concussions. The concussions are very, very worrying. It's just a really bad situation. We're obviously, as a Dolphins fan, it sucks to be able to say or have to say or want to say it's football. I would love to make the playoffs, but I'd rather not have Tua end up like Junior Seau or these other guys that have CTE that end their lives and possibly some others early because their brains are so damaged. And it's terrifying to think that this keeps happening, and he's not the only one. This used to be normal. It used to be you get your bell rung, you go to the sideline, you get some smelling salts, you go right back in. But now that we know a little bit more about the brain trauma and all of it behind it, you just got to hope that the NFL, the Dolphins, the NFLPA do right by Tua, make sure he takes the time off he actually needs to heal. Whether that is a few weeks, get to the offseason and come back in July at training camp and see how you're doing, or if that happens to be another 8-10 days before you play the Jets in week 18. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but you got to do more than worry about the physical athlete at this time. You have to worry about the person. And I really think the Dolphins have to consider the possibility that Tua is not going to be able to play a very long career if he keeps having these concussions. It's a bad situation for Tua. It's a bad situation for the Dolphins as a whole, but you got to do right by the player. You got to do right by the person over the team in this situation.
Yeah, because plus, how many concussions did he have in college? And then it's all cumulative.
Yeah, cumulative is the right word, but when you have a mild concussion followed by a major concussion where people were like, is Tua going to die? After that Cincinnati hit, there were people thinking he might not move. He might not get better. Or if he did, he was done for the year. He was done for his career. And he came back in 4 weeks. So it's a little alarming. And to see it, again, if we saw, somebody from the Packers just wallop Tua Tagovailoa and his head driven into the ground, you might go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's something that happens. But to not see anything that's a smoking gun, that's really alarming.
Well, you had the hit in the Monday game that wasn't a concussion, but still pretty serious. James, who did the helmet to helmet, he was a human spear and just absolutely knocked.
Thank God he got the shoulder pad first on that hit. The Derwin James hit on Austin Doolin. Thank God he got some shoulder pad first, or else Doolin might not have gotten up. That would have been horrific, but he got a lot of shoulder pad on the way through. Still a bad hit, but NFL is going to have to go into the concussion protocol, the concussion mitigation. They're going to have to put some suspensions out there. They're really going to have to start laying the lumber against these players that make these dangerous hits like Derwin James very nearly did, that cause these major injuries, and they're going to have to punish teams with draft capital if they keep putting situations like Tua back on the field.
And didn't you have the Ndamukong Suh hit on Justin Fields that basically knocked him out for a while?
Yeah. You have to do right by the players. Tua is going to be the poster child for this. And I really hope that Tua is able to recover in full and have the full, healthy, happy career that he wants to have. I have my concerns at this point that that's possible. And I think if you are the Dolphins, you got to go and look for that Baker, that Garoppolo, that Derek Carr, that Gardner Minshew, maybe Carson Wentz comes available. Someone that's, if you got to put him in the starting lineup, you might not be like, yes, I got this guy, but somebody you have a lot more confidence in than Teddy Bridgewater or Skylar Thompson, because right now it doesn't look like Tua's brain is going to hold up. And that is not something you want to be able to say about another human being, is that the brain is going to physically wilt because of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, because if it's sad when you're looking at the internet if all of those turnovers were in fact caused by the concussion, and you're seeing all the, instead of Tua Tagovailoa to turn the ball over, it's like if you were knocked the bleep out, that's why he was turning the ball over, and not because he was having a bad day. It was because of the injury.
I've had my bell rung. I've played in hockey games where I play in goal, a puck hits you in the head, and you're a little dizzy the rest of the way. And I've seen it where it takes a while for you to really start feeling the full effects of it. So that could have been very much what happened. And Tua was throwing at guys like there was a Mostert play. Mostert didn't even turn around and look at the ball. The ball was already picked off before he turned. He was not throwing smart balls, which is the concerning part. Because I remember I was literally sitting in the living room. What the hell are you looking at? Why are you throwing these balls? You were not doing this earlier. Well, maybe that's the explanation that makes the most sense. Smoking gun may have been found. Yeah. So yeah, pretty much. Anyways, that's the sports shuffle on a very serious note, because that's it's important. So we'll get to the picks on Friday. No major breaking news. Tyler Lockett goes through the walkthrough, and Kenneth Walker was a rest day, so maybe both of those play. We'll see for the Seahawks this week. We'll talk more about the Week 17 games. We'll talk about the fantasy lineups and hopefully get some championships on my side of things. And maybe, just maybe, the Mango Bowl title would be a sports shuffle thing. So that would be awesome. Finished in the top 300 last year. Have a shot to better on that result this year. Could be worse, but only time will tell. Anyways, Joel, one more show until the fantasy football season for the most part is over.
Hashtag sad noises.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where I mean, it's good. I'm to the point where I'm ready for the break. I'm ready to not have to check lineups and struggle and stress and all that. That's gonna be nice. But by the time we get to like the first couple of rounds of the playoffs, I'm gonna start to miss and be like, oh no, I have 6 more months of this. It's good to be in Dynasty League, so you have at least that. Keep in one more piece of advice for everybody out there: keep in touch with football. There's going to be news. There's going to be moves. There's going to be free agency, drafts, coaching changes. Understand what those mean. Do it. I mean, literally, I have a page of notes already for next season. Things I want to remind myself when we get to draft season, because one of them on there is remember that Josh Jacobs is very, very good. He always gets forgotten. He was a 4th or 5th round pick last year in a lot of leagues. He was the running back 1 for a vast majority of the season if he's not still there. Remember, he is very, very good. Keep stuff like that in the back of your mind. Remember that Jonathan Taylor was great when he played. He just had ankle injuries that never properly healed.
Hawkinson had a rough year, but he might end up winning somebody their league.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got a whole page of notes. Maybe when we get to the offseason, I'll go through some of the stuff I've got written down. I'm going to keep expanding on this and just impart some wisdom out there and see who wants to take hold. Because there's a lot of things you forget in the 6 months between the Super Bowl and draft season. Anyways, I am Flying Ryan Gilchrist, along with, as always,
Tampa Motor Mouth, Joel Verlin.
Back in a couple days for the Week 17 picks to look ahead towards the Fantasy Championship weekend. And, yeah, get ready for the end of the regular season. We might have some playoff scenarios to go over next week. Super Bowl sucks. Going to be down to the Super Bowl next week, so it's all coming to the end of the year. Oh well. With that, we own.